What's going down, people? It's your boy Myer Krah back again with another episode of Here for the Dads podcast. Today, we have a guest, one of the voices behind Sad Dads Club, a powerful community where fatherhood and mental health meet vulnerability. Built from the idea that dads need a space to feel seen, heard, and supported. Sad Dad Club is for those navigating the often unspoken struggles of being a father, whether it's depression, identity, or the pressure to hold it all together. This platform gives permission to men to break the cycle, to open up and heal. So today, we're going to talk about it. And we got my guy, Rob. What's going on? How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Myer, for having me on here and giving me the chance to share a little bit about an absolutely remarkable community made up of even more remarkable individuals, the Sad Dads Club.
Awesome. Where are you right now?
Right now, I am in Falmouth, Maine.
Maine. I remember going to Maine. I went long time ago. It was probably 2019, maybe even 2018. I remember almost hitting a whale and eating a lobster roll. Two very opposite things, but it was a good time. It was great.
It sounds like you had the quintessential Maine experience, that you did it just right. I'm glad you didn't hit the whale. I'm sure the whale's glad too, but you got a lobster roll, and that was a really important part of everyone's visit to Maine.
Absolutely. Let me ask you one more question before we dive into it. Lobster roll, should it be eaten hot or cold?
Oh, personal preference. I don't want to yuck someone's yums.
Oh, okay,
I have
okay,
the way
okay.
I like it, but I think a world of options is very important. We got to be able to do what to us feels and tastes best.
It just is what
On
it
that
is.
note, cold for me.
Okay, I had to know. I didn't know if it was like, if you're a man, it's like, no, it must be eaten like this, or some people in New York, they get very specific about their food, and Italians do too. Everybody in their culture kind of has like a thing, so I definitely get it if there is a thing.
But I'm an equal opportunity consumer when it comes to lobster rolls. However you like it, you should be able to enjoy it however it's best to you.
That's what I like to hear. So let's get into the Sad Dads Club. Why was it created? And talk to me about the creators of the Sad Dads Club.
Gladly. I am one of three co-founders. So Chris, Jay, and I are the three co-founders of the Sad Dads Club. And in a shortest way possible, we're filling a void. The three of us within the span of 18 months had stillborn daughters, and there just was not a lot of support out there for bereaved fathers. There was understandably a lot of resources, communities, and groups that were centered towards the birthing parent, towards the mother. And that makes a lot of sense because they go through the physical as well as the emotional, psychological, spiritual. The birthing parent goes through everything. But there is still such an intense need to be able to have community-based support for something so traumatic, something so terribly sad and life-changing. I mean, as a bit of a backstory, Jay and I were best friends from Bowdoin College. We graduated together in 2007. I was the best man in his wedding. He lived at my parents' house after we graduated when he was working in DC, but didn't yet have housing. We go way, way back. We've known each other longer than we haven't. In January of 2017, it was any day now their second child was going to be born. And at 41 weeks, due to a cord accident, their daughter Bella was stillborn. I had a front row seat to watching one of my best friends go through the most heartbreaking experience I'd ever seen a friend of mine go through. I'd never even heard of the term stillbirth. I'd never heard of a stillborn child because it never was brought up or it had never happened to anybody in my life prior to that. So as my family and I tried to support them as best we could in seeing how unbelievably heartbreaking it was, we really had a better understanding for the depth of that grief from, again, seeing his family go through such a sudden and incredibly traumatic experience. 11 months later, that same year in 2017, on December 13th of 2017, my daughter Lila was stillborn. So as I like to say, I had the fortunate misfortune of having someone that I could go to in my life immediately. And I could get comfort from Jay. I could get perspective from him. I could get advice. I could also just be myself. I didn't have to mask the way that we do sometimes professionally or within social groups because we feel as though there's a certain expectation of us. Carrying around that grief changed me as a person. Going through that experience of welcoming my daughter and immediately having to say goodbye changed me, and it haunted me, and it still does sometimes to this day. And there was such profound comfort that Jay was able to provide. 7 months after that, through a mutual friend, we were introduced to Chris. And he had also a stillborn daughter, Isabel, on in July of 2018. So again, within the span of less than 18 months, the three of us had stillborn daughters. The three of us started spending a lot of time together. We were all in the Portland, Maine area. And again, Jay and I were introduced to Chris by mutual friends. His wife had gone to school with us. And there was magic in our ability to be there for one another. There was magic in the space that we created for one another. And it dawned on us that there are guys out there who probably don't have anyone they can go to, no one in their community, no one in their professional life, no one else that they know that understands the unique complexities of perinatal loss or child loss or baby loss. And so we said, with the power of the internet and social media, our reach could potentially be boundless. Let's start a website. Let's offer our 3 birth stories and let's see how it evolves. And soon after that, a lot of dads started engaging with us from not just all around the country, but all over the world. Because once again, there just wasn't any community-based support for fathers who had lost children. A majority of the dads in our community have experienced perinatal loss, but it's expanded organically, again, just due to lack of resources, to dads who have experienced the loss of older children or even adult children. And I think that that's just a response to 2 things. One is just a lack of resources, the lack of community-based support, and also the fact that grief becomes such a universally bonding experience, and so does healing. And so that the circumstances under which someone has lost their baby or their child, they're important to their story, and it's incredibly important. But within our community, the circumstances under which the loss occur become less, it's not a barrier for connection. There are guys who are dealing with grief and dealing with this new perspective and these new challenges in life that they had never experienced before. And someone who's lost his 8-year-old daughter to an undiagnosed brain tumor is connecting with someone who had to terminate a wanted pregnancy for medical reasons because of a family dynamic that has now emerged, or because of professional hardships that have emerged. And it really is just life after loss and dealing with grief that has become the most binding element of our community.
And it's hard to understand sometimes why, after such a traumatic situation, that there's gaps in support. I guess that's the best way to say it, because oftentimes when I speak to other fathers who have dealt with miscarriages or infant loss, I would oftentimes hear them say that they would always check on my wife, but no one really asked, like, if I was okay. Or they were acting like they were okay because they felt like they needed to be the support person. Like they didn't have the time to truly grieve. And that traumatic situation will continue to show up throughout their lives because they still weren't able to talk about it. To know that you guys have created a community in order to do that and to make people feel comfortable to do that, right? Because I personally think that, or at least what I've seen, is that a lot of men may always have something to say, but not say it for the chance of getting reprimanded, for the chance of being misunderstood, or maybe feeling weak, or they just don't think someone else has been through that. Like the closest groups of men that I've been in is like sports teams and in the Navy, because we all go through boot camp, which really, really sucks, or some type of football camp, which really, really sucks. And it's like, hey, you've been through something similar. I feel comfortable with talking to you because I feel like you understand. So I can kind of let down this wall of this shield. And I think once you start having those conversations, I think vulnerability starts to get strengthened through that too. And you start maybe sometimes feeling more comfortable with speaking to other people that you don't know necessarily have been through that or know someone who's been through that. And it can strengthen an entire community. What have you seen the Sad Dads Club do for you and your friends specifically since you guys have created it?
I have a space now where I know I can talk about Lila, and she's my firstborn and she always will be. And I know that there's an eager audience who's waiting to hear whatever I have to share about her. She doesn't have to be someone who I'm afraid to bring up because I might make somebody feel uncomfortable, because it's difficult, if you haven't been through it, to sit in that space with someone who has lost a child and share that discomfort with them. There's a place where she's always remembered, where people are thinking about her, and the complexities of loss in general. I think, not that I'm any expert by any means, but the world just keeps moving. And it becomes really hard because that loss is with you for the rest of your life. And healing and grieving, those are also two lifelong things. And I know that I can come to Sad Dads Club with whatever I'm feeling, with whatever I'm struggling with, and that I'm going to get support. I'm going to get validation, and that these people, my daughter is remembered thanks to these people. I've I've had friends forget her birthday, and I get it too. Like, this is not me reprimanding people who have not been through infant or child loss, and like, cause life keeps moving and it feels like it moves even faster after loss. People just kind of want to get back to everything. People want to focus on the happy, positive things. But Sad Dads Club has allowed Lila to become something happy and positive, because it isn't just pain that I'm able to associate her with. It's this incredible legacy and these other dads who have association with her and who will let me know when they're thinking about her. When they see her name somewhere, I'll get a picture of it, and they keep her with me and they keep her in this world in that way. And that's the most invaluable gift that I could ask for amidst not having her here physically.
That's powerful. That really is. And to know that there's not this sense of darkness about it anymore. Like, it's not just in your head and you're able to share, and other people are along there with you and like having that conversation. Can you take me back to the moment? And I want to be sensitive about it too as well. And I'm not sure if you've gotten a chance to share more of your birth story or how deep, but I want to possibly resonate with some of the fathers who are listening, about like how that moment felt for you, and even maybe even take me out to a year or more before the Sad Dad Club was really created, and how that felt for you, how your friends were there or not there, how family was there or not there, what you may have needed and didn't get. Could you take me back there for a little while?
Absolutely. When I was with my wife at the 38-week appointment, and it was a Wednesday. I remember it so clearly. It was, again, December 13th, 2017. Interestingly, that night before, I had a dream where I had my arms in a position where they were cradled, trying to hold a baby, and this baby was like floating. And I kept trying to adjust my arms so that I could hold her and cradle her. And I couldn't get her to settle in my arms. And
Wow.
I believe in that moment is probably when she passed in my wife's belly. And, my wife didn't have sudden bleeding. There was no sharp pain. There was no noticeable decrease in movement. But that Wednesday, my wife and I got into some very trite argument about whether or not we needed to put the recycling curbside. Because we had a very early morning appointment. We were the first ones in the doctor's office that morning. And so I was like, oh, we got to put the recycling out before. She's like, no, we'll be fine. Let's just go. We don't want to be late. So we get to the doctor's office, and I'm still a little bit in the mood about this recycling thing, which is so ridiculous because it doesn't matter. But I'm there, but I'm not paying as close attention as in retrospect I should have been. I'm not engaged with my wife. I'm looking down at the phone as she's being weighed and having the measurements. And then we go into the room for the Doppler wand to be used to pick up on the heartbeat. I'd been to enough of those doctor's appointments in the past that I knew what to listen for. I knew when they would pick up her heartbeat. And I'm still looking down at my phone, just being not quite entirely present. And something dawns on me that I know they're using the Doppler because I can hear it, the static, but I don't hear a heartbeat yet. And I look up at my wife and she looks at me, and then nurse says, like, you know what, let's just go do an ultrasound. Sometimes this happens. And she leaves the room to get the ultrasound room prepared for us. And I see my wife move her hands around her belly and look at me. She's like, no, I feel her. It's fine. It's fine. I don't know if she did or didn't. I don't think she did, but I think that this was a defense mechanism she was using. My heart it has dropped at this point. As I mentioned before, my best friend Jay and fellow co-founder of Sad Dads Club had been through a stillbirth 11 months earlier. So this was on my radar now as something I'd never heard of it before, but I knew that it was possible. I knew there was no guarantee that your baby was coming home until they were home. And we went into the room to have a proper ultrasound. The doctor came in and they put the wand on the belly for just a couple seconds. And I saw the doctor hold my wife's hand and just say, I am so sorry. And I'll never forget the look on my wife's face and the panic and the sadness and the disbelief. And she just screamed. And I put my hands over my eyes. And I just remember being like, I don't want to take these hands down ever. Like, no, I can't believe this is happening. I can't, like it was a textbook pregnancy leading up to that point. Everything was as it should have been. Everything was progressing in a healthy way. We were being monitored, and her heart stopped and there was no heartbeat. And at that moment, the doctor starts talking about what we need to do next, that we need to go pack our bags and get to the hospital because Tahila, my wife, will need to deliver Lila, our daughter. And I am thinking, just like, how are we going to do this? How is this going to be possible? And how am I going to drive us, even just the very basic logistical requirements of this whole ordeal? How am I going to get us on the highway, get us back home? How are we going to know what to pack in our bags? How long are we going to be at the hospital for? Is she actually really dead? Has Lila really not alive anymore? Sort of a see it to believe it thing. And I'll get into the moment where it really did all hit me. But we got back home. My wife called Jay's wife. I called Jay. I called one of my parents, and don't remember at all what I said, but just reported what was going on. And we threw things in a bag, got to the hospital, and were seen to a room. Again, our appointment at the doctor's earlier that day was early in the morning. So we probably got to the hospital around 9:30, 10 a.m. And Lila wasn't delivered until 10:49 that night. There were a lot of things going on at the hospital. Obviously, we were stable, so there was nothing further that could be done. We just had to wait for whenever they could take us. But amidst that, ordeal of waiting, I had my first panic attack ever. And it was just sitting in that room with my wife, looking at her so visibly pregnant, so visibly like ready to give birth, and knowing that Lila was dead, or being told that she wasn't alive in there. And it flooded on me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I'd never previously had a panic attack. And I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. I couldn't stop crying. I was completely out of control. And it was a scary situation. And my wife, kind of brought me back to center, to zero, to being able to be present and be ready for whatever we had to do next. And as the hours progressed, and finally in the evening they were ready for us, my wife opted to have a C-section because she wanted it to be as manageable a situation as it possibly could be. She could be heavily medicated during it. There was no danger to the baby at this point. So they took her off to prep her and get everything ready and have her properly medicated. And as I'm waiting in the room with all my gear on, getting ready for the operating room, and waiting there with a nurse who keeps engaging me in such an unbelievably kind way. And I do want to say shout out to Maine Medical Center where Lila was born. The care team was exceptional. And I know from engaging with the Sad Dads Club community that is not the case for everyone. And there is just such a disparity in care. And it's so unfair because horror stories I've heard that other people have shared, I can only imagine dealing with what you're dealing with and then having like a lack of empathy or patience. And so this nurse is engaging with me and asking how we picked the name Lila. And I'm just staring at the floor and watching tears come down and just hit the floor and hit the floor. And it became this like rhythmic, almost like hypnotizing thing where it was just crying and watching the tears as they would fall from my face to the floor, and watching them spread a little bit, and giving very short answers to everything the nurse was asking me, just because I couldn't bring myself to like fully speak. So they're finally ready for me in the OR, and I go in, and it's clear that my wife is very heavily medicated, to the point where I think that she's actually forgotten what is going on. And she even says to me, "I want to have sex." And I'm like, well, can't do that right now, but we can take care of that later. And then Lila's born. And that's the moment that for me, it gripped my heart so tightly I thought it might burst, because I know there was a part of me that thought maybe they're wrong. Maybe she's going to come out, she'll be crying, and this will all just be like a horrible mistake, and she'll be all right, and she's alive, and we're going to take her home. But the silence once she was brought out, it was that's when everything became real. Even though I had been emotionally drained and involved in everything and crying and sad and disoriented. That moment where she wasn't crying when she was born and where I saw them place her down and she just wasn't moving was when everything kind of came crashing down on me. And the real moment that just broke me, for lack of any better term I could possibly use, is when they swallowed old Lila and put her on her mother's chest. And as I had mentioned, my wife was heavily medicated. And I think in that moment, she forgot that Lila had died. And she was just saying, like, my baby, like, I love you. And yeah, that was brutal. That was so heartbreaking and so difficult to watch. And as we wheel out and go back to our room, Tehila has Lila with her. And we spent as much time as we could with her in that hospital until you can't, because they start not to look like themselves and nature is taking course, and it's very clear when it's time to say goodbye. My wife slept with Lila on her chest. I would wake up in the morning and just look over, and it just broke me every time. I had like the most, the tiniest sliver of relief or strength returning to me. It was then just immediately taken away, and I was in a more painful place than I had been before, when it felt like it was impossible to feel any more pain. And I have no recollection of leaving the hospital. Through therapy and EMDR and other things, I've tried to unearth that memory of like leaving, but I have no recollection whatsoever of leaving the hospital. And I think it's just too painful for me to access a moment where I had to leave my daughter alone. And as in terms of the following weeks, months, in that first year, grief is, from my experience, it was just dizzying. I had friends who came up immediately and who were wonderful, and my family came up immediately. Everybody doing the best that they can, and I am so fortunate beyond measure for that. But as months start to go by and life starts to move on a little bit more, our house is just still so eerily quiet, and that reminder is so omnipresent for us that she is not there, that her absence is the biggest thing in our lives. And life moves on, and people stop checking on you as often as they did, and people stop sharing that discomfort with you because it's hard for them. And I don't discount anyone for it. I know it could be difficult. And, within my family personally, we had 3 different pregnancy announcements within the first 6 months. And that was hard. Like, things that were joyous, things that should be celebrated, things that I and my wife wanted to be a part of because they were so incredible and miraculous, which is the true summation of like pregnancy and childbirth. Like, we just couldn't participate in those because it was too painful for us. Especially at the 6-month mark, when our doctor said, okay, you can safely start trying again. And then we had secondary unexplained infertility. So ended up having to go through more serious intervention to eventually have our rainbow baby, our son Dallas. But that first year was just, Chris, one of the co-founders, Isabel's dad, he always puts it really well. It's like that scene in a movie where someone's at a crosswalk and they're just still and everything is just lightning speed moving past them. And you can't seem to get in a headspace or a heart space where you can keep up. It's just everything is too fast. Everything is too much. And you are stuck in one place. That's like the whole first year of grief. And I credit him with that analogy because I think that really hits the nail on the head. Even though life is moving at whatever speed it had been, it feels like it's so accelerated and you just can't keep up because you're so stuck with that grief, with that loss, with trying to take care of your partner, with trying to take care of yourself. Both Chris and I, we both lost our firstborn. Jay lost his secondborn, so he had a living child at home. And we always talk about the different complexities around having to show up for that child. And Chris and I always say to Jay, you can't believe that like you would have to put it on for your child and show up for them and be there for them and be the parent And he's like, well, that got us out of bed in the morning. You know, I can't imagine not having that and being able to get out of bed. So it's one is no worse than the other. It's just within our community, we talk about, you know, different intricacies of that loss experience, especially in that first year. And friends and family were there for me as much as they could be. But Sad Dads Club came as starting as just Chris J and me. And that became everything for me. That became everything, I think, for all three of us in terms of a space where we knew we could be with one another and we could take the mask off. We could just be. We could say everything or say nothing, and we didn't have to explain anything to anyone. And so that really just became an incredibly powerful outlet amidst a really hard year. I mean, Jay was with me so much during that first year, and then Chris comes along. You know, I'm 7 months removed from my loss. He goes through his loss, so he saw me through the rest of the first year. And it's hard to know what to do and what to say as a loved one of someone who's lost a baby or who's lost a child. And we often say it's okay not to know what to say. It's just not okay to say nothing. All people need to know is that you're acknowledging it. You know, it's difficult. You can even say, I don't know what to say. There is nothing perfect to say amidst such an imperfect reality. Nothing is going to fix it. Nothing is going to make it better. Well, that's not true. It will make it better if you acknowledge it. It will give them that validation that you know they're going through something, and it will also ensure them that you're thinking not only of them but their child. I think a huge part of my fear in that first year of grief was no one else got to meet Lila. No one else got to spend time with her. She is only in what I can tell people and show them with pictures. That how easy is that for everyone to forget? How easy is that for everyone else to move on from that they didn't know her, they didn't have any time with her? And you know, that I guess that's a unique complexity of going through a stillbirth or a termination for medical reasons. But again, there are other complexities that I don't fully understand because I haven't lived it with losing a baby or an older child. So I certainly don't want to come across as discrediting any of that. Just that grief is hard, and I think the world likes to move on more quickly as exterior observers and loved ones. But I've also seen more and more and heard more and more about people more willing to make space and share that discomfort. But I'm getting a little off topic now to your original
No, we
question.
are
But
all on topic. Like, if I got to stop first and just say, like, thank you for having this conversation with me, like, period. And I know I'll probably say thank you again and 100 times after this, but the topic that we're talking about is not easy. And what you're sharing with me is not easy. And it may not get easier every time. It may get easier every time. Like, you would have to tell me that, but just me sitting here listening, I am trying my darnest to, like, keep it together and, like, to not cry just so I can be prepared to ask another question. But as I'm listening, I'm thinking about every father who may have been in a place where they just felt so completely unprepared. Like you mentioned, never have even heard of stillbirth. You talked about a moment where there was nothing but just getting hit by questions. What am I supposed to do? What do you mean this? Like, where is it supposed to go with this? Like, how is this even possible? And then there's the more phantom mental questions of like, well, maybe this is a mistake. It's just getting flooded by these emotions and unprepared thoughts that could send you in a frenzy before any action even takes place. And then there's so much aftermath. And then there's putting on masks and possibly having put on a mask for your spouse or your child or maybe your friends, because we talked about being uncomfortable. Like, just that, it's great to be able to sit in that space, right? If you are okay with being uncomfortable, you're okay with having uncomfortable conversations. But if you're not okay, but you know your friend is not okay with having the conversation about not being okay, now you got to put on a mask to like you're okay just so they can feel okay. And I know I'm just saying the same thing over and over, but I hope you understand what I'm saying when I mean that. Is just, you also don't want to always seem like a problem. You also don't want to seem like the downer, and you want to catch up to the moving traffic. But is there some guilt there too? Like, am I going to forget? And you think about maybe moving on and continuing to have a family or to start a family again? Is there guilt there? And I know I'm just talking, but I recognize I'm just talking, but there's just so much going on in my head, and maybe you can slow me down for a second as I get bombarded by these thoughts and these questions. Was there some guilt moving on or feeling like you needed to move on?
Short answer, yes. And that's because this is something we're actually going to talk about, or we have talked about, in the conversations in Sad Dads Club they never end. They're continuous, because as we evolve, certain elements of our story and our grief are also evolving. And as you say, the guilt is huge. We once said relief felt like a betrayal to my child's memory, because you are so closely associating that child you lost with pain and with heartbreak that it feels like that is your connection to them, those feelings. So Chris, Izzy's dad, also, as I mentioned, one of the other co-founders said that he remembers the first time he smiled after losing Isabel, after losing Izzy, and he immediately was like, no, don't smile. You can't do that. That's not. And so that physical reaction of wanting to keep yourself from experiencing relief, it's all rooted in guilt, because you feel guilty for quote unquote moving on. And there is no moving on. There is living with. That's what you're going to do when it comes to continuing in life after a loss like that, and when you're living with grief. And so things that historically had fulfilled me, that I loved doing, like music, performing music and listening to music, it didn't resonate with me anymore. I would pick up a guitar, I'd pick up drumsticks, and it was just like empty. And I would listen to music and it didn't move me the way that it did my entire life. Those are my passions, and they were completely void of that emotional fulfillment that they once had. And I felt as though I may never have the same relationship with these things in my life that have fulfilled me. And maybe that's the way it's supposed to be, because maybe I am supposed to live in this permanence of pain, in this longing, in this heartbreak, because again, that in the very beginning stages of grief is how you're most closely associating how you remember and how you feel about your child, because it's so heartbreaking that they've gone, that your baby has died. That becomes your default. That's your connection. And so you subconsciously or consciously kind of want to stay there, and you maybe keep yourself there longer because, again, you feel guilty if you should experience any happiness. Why should I ever be happy? I don't deserve to be happy. That would suggest that I'm moving on, that I'm getting better. I don't want to, how could I ever get better from something so profound? But time and community, and I think also therapy, can offer some miraculous healing. And I think it's also kind of going beyond feeling that grief. I have such a different relationship with my daughter now. I'm over 7 years removed from losing her. And what had begun as a journey that was defined by heartbreak and by pain and by yearning and longing, I now find her in beautiful things. I now have associations with her that are in some of the most miraculous, incredible, beautiful, and joyous things in my life. One of those being her little brother. And in terms of guilt, I would say there was more terror than guilt. But that's for me personally. I've heard from other dads who have expressed that feeling of guilt and continuing the dream of expanding their family. But I more so experienced terror. I wanted to keep Lila. She'll always was and always will be a part of our family. And I wanted to believe that she was looking after her little brother as we went through that pregnancy after loss, which was the longest 9 months of our lives. But that guilt is very real for a lot of people. And that guilt associated with both relief and both, some people think, oh, is this going to be perceived as replacing my child? Is this going to be, but it's not. It's not replacing. You never replace that child. And I think that Sad Dads Club gives dads who are in this position, who are dealing with these complicated questions and emotions, a place where they can be validated and know that, like, if you are struggling with that, that's fine and that's okay. And you can also hear from dads who have been through it, who have very clearly remember going through those difficult questions and those feelings of guilt around continuing family expansion, around experiencing joy again. And I think one of the most powerful things is really hearing the stories from dads who now, again, find their child who isn't physically here in these beautiful places and things. There's always going to be heartbreak behind losing them. There's always going to be a feeling of sadness, but there won't only be a feeling of heartbreak and sadness.
Yeah. I always talk about change being good and understanding that conversation a lot of times is what gets us there, but you can only have conversations within community. If I speak to you a little bit just about the conversations piece, I want to know what it sounds like in the home between you and your wife as you're starting to talk about creating a family again. Like, did you, or not creating a family again, but starting family again? Like, was it hard? What made it easier? What type of support and help did you have? What did you need in order for you two to work together to make that happen? And then the conversation piece as with Dallas. Now, how old is Dallas now?
He's 5.5.
He's 5.5. Having the conversation with him, if you've had that conversation, what is it like talking to your kids about it or them understanding? And I only ask this of you, and not just because you have all the answers, but I know you've spoken to many fathers and have these different experiences. Could you help me put that together of what that might look like and sound like?
I needed Chris and Jay. I needed their support. They both went on to have rainbow babies, which is the term for a child who is, born healthy, happy, goes home after losing a child. They both had rainbow babies before our family did. And that was such a bright glimmer of hope. It's possible. It can happen. And I needed that. And I needed both of them there by my side, both literally and proverbially, like they were by my side. And that's what I needed. That was the support from peers who had been through what I had been through and who had gone on to achieve the dream of continuing to expand their family. My wife and I, it's one of the first things that we connected on. I have always wanted to be a father since the day I could conceptualize that dynamic. Like I just knew it was something I wanted. And she, the same way, always wanted to be a mother. We were always eager to have a family. And so we knew that was something we were going to pursue. So we knew that we were going to try again after Lila died, and having to wait 6 months because my wife had delivered Lila via C-section. That was hard for my wife because it was such a life raft of this. If we're pregnant again, that will reinstill hope. And that's true, but it's a little more complicated, or at least it was for me. And then going through secondary unexplained infertility, eventually then going through IVF, which was a whole different roller coaster because then it just became this slimmer and slimmer possibility that this dream would be achieved for us. But amidst that journey, we had a lot of really great success in terms of viable embryos. So there were these bits of hope that we got. But going into IVF was pretty scary because it's like, if this doesn't work, there are even fewer options available for us. But again, we are so fortunate that we were able to successfully go through IVF and bring our rainbow baby into the world. And I think the extra time for me was helpful, even though it was difficult in other ways with dealing with fertility, figuring out what our options were and how likely it would be that we could have a family. It did give me more time to process Lila's loss, and that was very helpful. And for me personally, but Chris and Jay were checking on me all the time. They were right there with me for everything. They were recognizing that my family was experiencing a hurdle that was different from the journey that their families had, but that didn't stop them from being the most steadfast, solid, and reliable sources of support. And all this leading up to, we didn't start Sad Dads Club as an official community or opening up to try and hopefully start a community, which it has now become, until, I was 4 years removed from the loss. So we had all had rainbow babies. We had all had this time together, the three of us, where that was Sad Dads Club. It was the three of us. And that was what I needed. And that's one of the points. And I'm so glad that you asked about this, because as I reflect, that showed me the power of peer support, of community, of having these dads who would allow me to be vulnerable, who would always be there open and waiting to embrace me if I needed it. And even when I didn't know I needed it, they would. And that for me I got a ton of support from my wife. We were always very open and communicative with one another, but there is just something else different about the father's perspective and about having a peer outlet. And it was as though like Chris and Jay took it upon themselves to take care of me. And that's what we were doing for each other at any given point. And as we started this journey with infertility and figuring out, like, they were right there and they were like encouraging me, not in any way of like toxic positivity, blind faith of like, it'll happen. Cause we wouldn't dare say that.
People say
at
that
this point. And they say it. And it's the best intentions and we get it, but it's interesting how, especially within the community of Sad Dads Club, like our language changes. When somebody gives a pregnancy announcement in our Discord channel, everybody says a gentle congratulations, because we understand that this, like, it's not a sure thing. And even not every dad has experienced perinatal loss. So even if there is a dad who has lost, a baby or a younger child and who is now about to have a rainbow baby, that dad maybe before wasn't aware of how often it happens that a child is stillborn or you have to terminate for medical reasons. And so while there are more possibilities of things that can happen, it's just like a more intense, amplified view of reality. And it's just very real in there. And I think that pregnancy after loss support that I got from Chris and Jay really solidified for me the importance and the magnitude that could come from peer support of people who got it, of people who lived it. And they were exactly that. And that is exactly what I needed.
That's good. Just saying that, that's good. I think sometimes looking back and reflecting on what we needed, now oftentimes do we get a chance to recognize that those pieces were there. And then once we figure out that the pieces were there, we turn it into like a place of service and say, well, I want to give this to other people, because there are a lot of people dealing with the same thing. Mm-hmm. I had no clue of the rates. I had no clue how many people might have dealt with miscarriage, infant loss, any of that stuff, until I started having kids. And then I started reading more, seeing more. And I was like, there's a gap here somewhere. Why does my wife know all this information? Why is it showing up on her page? Why are there all these different communities and groups where this knowledge is being shared and I'm not seeing any of it? Like, I'm not hearing any of it. And now that I'm a dad and I'm seeing it and I'm hearing it and I'm knowing a little bit more of how to show up for my friends who may have dealt with that or may be dealing with it right now, there still are going to be men who are not yet fathers who have no clue. How do I spread that information earlier than later? How do I prepare them? When can I start having these conversations? And I want to go back to answer the second part, at least to reframe the question, or at least remind you of the question, the second part with Dallas, talking about having kids and having that conversation. Because I recognize that that's hard to do too. What did that look like, sound like for you and maybe some of the fathers in the community of Sad Dads Club?
Yeah, that is a really, I wish there was something, all I can do is offer my own experience in what we did. And I think as soon as possible, we just started saying Lila's name. So it was a name that he was familiar with before he could speak. And as a caveat, Dallas was diagnosed with autism when he was 2.5. So he has significant speech delay, but he is such a bright and joyous and chaotic and wonderful human being whom I love so boundlessly. But his speech being limited, the way that he could give Lila back or ask about her was delayed a bit. But we knew it was just important to keep her part of the conversation because he's still taking everything in and he's still internalizing what he hears from us, and just hearing the name Lila, seeing it written out, explaining and just saying, that's your sister, when we're doing art and I'm doing it, writing out words, and I make sure to include Lila there. And when we're in the car, there's just a certain light that I see that reminds me of her. And we always call it Lila's light. And I say, like, that's your sister. You have a big sister. And questions come up like, we frame it, you have a sister who's in the stars. And because developmentally it feels like that's the most appropriate, best way to convey that it is someone who is a part of your life who is not physically here. And he'll say things like, I don't want her in the stars. I want her come to my house. And I was like, me too, buddy. That's just part of what life looks like for our family right now. She's in the stars forever and she can't come to our house, but we can find her in things. We can make memories with her by having places or activities or anything you want to associate with her. And I said, if you see a bird that you love and you want to say that that's Lila, that can be Lila. If you see a beautiful flower that you love and you want that to be Lila, then that can be her. We have to find her in different ways than you do with your friends at school, in the classroom. We have to, and again, the extent to which he really understands, and we've started talking about, because he's brought it up, he says dying and death. And we say that Lila died, that her heart stopped. And he said, well, why? And say, we don't really know. We asked okay, what about the doctors? Do they know? And it's like, they don't really know either. They did every test under the sun after she was stillborn because we requested every thing just to see if what went wrong, what may have caused it, or are we at risk for it happening again? That anything that you can predictively tell. And as the doctor said, there isn't anything you did or didn't do. And so conveying that to Dallas, that we don't really know why. She just had to go and be in the stars and watch over us there. And I want to recognize that this is so prominent in Sad Dad's Club. Just the whole notion of there is no right answer. It's what feels right to you and your family. And it's when it feels right to you and your family. We had a dad who recently sent a picture to our Discord channel, and he's like, when's the right time to go through your dead son's clothes? Maybe for some it's 1 week, maybe it's a month. For us, it was 529 days. He's like, all that to say, there is no right time. You're just going to feel compelled and pulled to it. I know I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but that really does just tie off.
You're answering questions that I was gonna ask. Like,
Okay.
this is all good stuff. Like
I'm getting ahead of schedule.
No. This is good, because I was gonna ask, like, when should dads move to that area that you're talking about right now? What should dads take away from this message and this conversation and learning about Sad Dad's Club? And you're answering that as well. So continue, please.
Whatever feels right to you, follow that. And whatever feels right to you in a moment, know that that is a moment. And that's all we have to go off of. And you're already dealing with something so heavy, so complicated, so confusing and sad and just like impossibly hard, that the sooner you can relieve yourself of the pressure of adhering to any timeline or doing it a certain way because you heard someone else did it, the easier I think things will be. I didn't go into Lila's memory box that we took home from the hospital, and we didn't put her ashes into her urn, which is right behind me right there, until this most recent Father's Day of last year. So it was almost 7 years later, despite that I was engaged with, and we were all, Sad Dad's Club existed, and I'm in this grief space and I'm all in on it. It took me almost 7 years to go and put her in a proper urn. I mean, shout out to Avi's dad, Mike, who handmade out of wood this most beautiful wooden box that she is in now. And like, I don't know why I didn't go in. I don't know why I didn't look at the pictures for years. I don't know why I didn't look at the locks of her hair. I don't know why I didn't look back at the handprints and the footprints. There's some things that maybe I did on an accelerated schedule that would be sooner than some lost dads would do it. But there are other things where I'm way, quote unquote, behind, but nobody is behind. Nobody's ahead. Everybody should just relieve themselves of the pressure of thinking that they have to do anything with any sort of urgency or any sort of expectation of timeline. Like, I share the story about moving her ashes to her urn and going back to looking at pictures I never saw of her. I had some pictures on my phone, but I'd never seen the pictures that the nurses took until this past Father's Day. And I was, again, almost 7 years out. And I'm fine with not knowing why. It just didn't feel right. I wasn't compelled, but then I was, and I did. And that's okay, because while grief unifies us in Sad Dad's Club, and we all experience very similar situations and dynamics, but we all also are completely different people. and how we choose to approach our loss and the ways in which we choose to heal, and the practices we have to go through, or the ceremonies that we have to accomplish, whatever it is, that's unique to you. And it's hard to make these sorts of decisions. It's hard to, I knew that she was in a box, and that like kind of messed me up a bit. And I knew that there were things, memories of her that I could go back to. But again, I didn't feel compelled. I didn't want to. And that's all right. When we were in the hospital, we had nurses take some pictures because that's what they do. But they asked us if we'd like to have a professional photographer come in. There's an organization, Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, which is national, and volunteers, photographers all over the country volunteer to come in and take these portraits of families who have lost children. And we said no. And right now, do I wish I had more pictures? Of course, yes. But also I can go back to that version of me there. And I can remember I said no because I couldn't handle it then. And that's all I had to go off of in that moment. And that's all that we could muster. That's all that we can expect of ourselves. Again, would it be great to have more pictures? Sure. But that wasn't possible then. Right now, over 7 years removed, like, who knows, even if you teleported me back into that space, being who I am now, maybe I'd still say no. And I think that it's also imperfect because it's such an imperfect outcome in reality. And it's so sad and it's so painful. It's heartbreaking. Your life falls apart. And then you pick up all these pieces. Some went under the couch, some slipped through cracks, and you put yourself back together. And some pieces are always going to be missing because you crumble into a million pieces. And you try your best to put yourself together, and you're always going to not quite be the same as you were. And that's just enough to change you completely.
Wow. I feel like I'm reading a book. Like I feel like, because it's so healing and helpful just to hear you say the words, and it's okay. Like there's these specific, unique scenarios in life that could almost feel like it could identify you, right? Like it's completely destroyed, or it could be traumatic. It completely changes everything. And it can spiral you into this dark place. It can spiral you into a place where you don't feel like you know anything anymore. But to hear you say scenario A, and it's okay. Scenario B, and it's still okay. Scenario C, but it's okay. Like this happened to you, and you felt like this, you reacted this way, and it's okay. I think a lot of fathers are looking for a space to be able to do that, and then to hear that in response. So thank you for standing in the gap for so many and being able to do that. And I just have two more questions before I get you out of here.
Yeah.
I want to know what you learned about yourself in this journey of creating this community, in this journey from start to end. Like, what did you learn that you didn't know that you had in you? And then two, what's next for Sad Dads Club? Like, I am invested. I don't know if I got to like register or how to like get a part of it or to donate, to share, but I am invested in what you guys do and how you guys are supporting each other. So yeah, those are my two questions before I get you out of here.
Well, thank you for all the kindness, for the belief in this work. And I just have to shout out the entire community, because it's not what it is without all of us individually coming together and making a collective. When Chris, Jay, and I had an idea for a community, it doesn't actualize if people don't show up. So there are such remarkable dads who are showing up over and over and over, and they are so eager to be sources of support for every new dad, for every existing dad, for each other. And that is what makes Sad Dads Club what it is. There is no one person. It's not just the three co-founders. It's all of us. And that is what I think has made the space so special, because everyone has something of value to offer. It does not matter if you are 1 week removed from your loss or 40 years removed from your loss. And we have dads on both sides of that, but someone could be 1 week removed and say something that completely changes my perspective and gives me a helpful tool to use when I'm going through something difficult, because I can reference something that someone said. And being further removed from your loss it gives you more perspective, but there are just some things that some of the guys say who are so much closer to their loss that just blow the lid off for me and change my perspective. And that's, I think the magic is that everybody has something of such immense value to offer. And that's what makes our space effective. That's how it works, because we all show up. And in terms of what I've learned about myself, that this is my calling, this is my purpose, I don't want to do anything else. I was so inspired by the support that Chris and Jay gave me. And I was so inspired by the dynamic that was created by having a space that the three of us created together. But in now doing this full time since October of 2023, it can be some of the most emotionally exhausting work I've ever done, but there is nothing more fulfilling, and there is nothing I want to spend my time doing than fostering this space that all of these dads are contributing towards making so powerful and so healing and so real. And that is just endlessly inspirational. And because I know every new dad that shows up to one of our Zoom meetings, every new dad who logs on to our Discord channel, I have complete confidence that they are going to be met with such love, warmth, and support that it's like, what I have to do everything I can. I have to dedicate all of myself to, and I don't know that I would have necessarily known or said that without taking the dive, and really just immersing myself in this work. And I feel so grateful, and I feel such immense responsibility to have the position I do. I'm the one full-time person currently at Sad Dads Club, but again, I'm the one full-time guy, but every single one of these dads is showing up every day for it. And so I feel immense honor, privilege, and responsibility to do whatever I can so that we as a community are as visible as possible, because we want to make sure that no dad out there who is going through the loss of a child thinks that there's nothing out there for them. Whether or not they hear of us and they feel ready to engage, take your time, take whatever time you need. And we also now always say our door is wide open. That means you can walk in at any time. And if it starts to feel like too much at any point, you can walk out, but then you can walk back in when you feel like you need it again. It's supposed to be a space that helps, that serves the individual to help them feel healing and relief. And I just learned in doing this that this is my calling, that this is what I feel in my bones compelled to do. I've never felt this way about anything in my life. I thought music was going to be it at one point, but this is a whole other level. This is just, it's profound. And I'm so inspired by Chris and by Jay, and I'm so inspired by the dads in our community, however long they've been with us, just each and every one of them to show up. That's a big step.
Yeah.
And to have a space that is that reliably nurturing and warm, it's like, this is something so special. So I'm going to do whatever I can to preserve and to grow it in a meaningful way, because I know that all the other dads are doing the same thing. They're preserving it and they're helping it grow by getting the word out in their communities, by helping us with our fundraising efforts, and anything that is asked of them that they can do, because they feel the power of what this space does. And so they want to make sure that other dads who might need it have access to it, and seamless access. In terms of what's next for the future, we recently rolled out our professional mental health support program. So as a community, we do two things. We have community building, which is all of our non-clinical peer-to-peer based community support. That's dads who share a life experience, getting together in a non-clinical space and being opening up, being vulnerable, and getting those feelings validated. We do that through virtual engagement as well as in-person events, whether it's regional or twice a year. We host a retreat in Maine. And so there's that side of community building is one of our priorities. And our other priority, which again is the newer of the two that we've just recently rolled out, is paying for up to 6 sessions with a qualified mental health professional for each dad. So we are removing not only the financial barrier to professional mental health, but also the logistical one. A lot of dads in the wake of loss will find their executive functioning gone. They don't have the emotional capacity to get online and say, Is there a therapist in my network? Is that therapist taking new patients? If that therapist doesn't take my insurance, can I afford it? Does this therapist even have experience treating a patient who has been through child loss and who is grieving? So Sad Dads Club as an organization is partnering with therapists who have experience treating patients who have endured child loss and who are grieving, so that we know that when we send a dad to a therapist, that they're going to the person who is best suited to treat them for what they're going for. And that is something we're really looking forward to expanding. We know that there's a disparity in access for professional mental health services. We want to make that seamless. The therapist bills, invoices Sad Dads Club directly. No insurance is involved. No ability to pay should have nothing to do with somebody accessing crucial professional mental health services. We thought, okay, we can do the community building part, but none of us are mental health professionals. And we want to create the most robust package for healing that we can. And we feel like those are the two areas where our impact can be the greatest, and we can aid in that healing amidst the grief journeys of the dads in our community.
Absolutely love that. And that alone is enough to support the Sad Dads Club. Where can the people find the Sad Dads Club, you, Chris J? Did I say it right? It's Chris and J, right?
Yep.
Yeah. See, I remember it. I can't wait to meet those guys, man. Where can the people find you guys?
So saddadsclub.org is our website. You can reach out there if you click the connect or contact and connect tab. Fill out that form. It goes directly to me. I am an incessant email checker and responder, so you'll hear back from me instantly. You can also reach out to us on Instagram. That's really our premier, most utilized social media network, social media channel. And so on Instagram, we are at sad.dads.club. And anybody who has any questions about it, reach out through our website, reach out through Instagram. We have people who can connect one-on-one. You're going to be in touch with someone immediately. If you want to learn more, if you have specific questions, ask away. It is a safe, inclusive, and supportive space for all bereaved fathers. We want to open the doors as widely as we can. There is no expectation when you come into our space that you need to share. If what does it for you is just listening to stories, then that's great. We encourage everyone and respect everyone utilizing the space in which it's most helpful for them. And that is all that we ask, is just do it how you would. We respect one another immensely, and it's a space for all bereaved fathers.
Thanks, Rob. Guys, you heard it here first. You know where to find them. Here for the dads. Out.